On Capitol Hill, the House Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously passed a bill to restrict commercial trade with Iran. The action comes as the International Atomic Energy Agency outlined Iran's progress in two programs the West believes are geared toward making nuclear weapons. Jonathan Schanzer is a former terrorism finance analyst at the Treasury Department. He's currently Vice President of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he joins us from our Washington bureau. Sir, welcome to Bottom Line. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Sir, the House Foreign Affairs Committee's Nuclear Iran Prevention Act seeks to close any loopholes in existing sanctions. Is this more symbolic than anything else? Would the legislation really hurt Iran to the point that its leaders would even consider giving up their nuclear ambitions?
Well, I think it's going to do some damage. It goes after three things. It goes after oil revenues. Right now, there's 1 million barrels per day that the Iranians produce. That is within a year going to be wiped off, and so the Iranians will have to look elsewhere for that revenue. They're going to go after Iran's cash reserves as well, and they're doing that by going after a European settling system called Target 2, as well as the gold trade, which has been fostered primarily by Turkey. And all of this is intended, at least in some way, to put increased pressure on the rial, the currency in Iran, that could potentially bring about a real crisis on the streets of Iran. I think what Congress is basically saying today is that the gloves are off.
Sir, you mentioned the oil there. Iran does insist that its program is for peaceful purposes, the nuclear program. Iran is one of the original signatories of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The country does have the world's fourth biggest proven oil reserves. What are the economic consequences for Iran's oil exports if it doesn't discontinue its nuclear ambitions?
Well, I think what we're looking at right now is that already that oil reserves, or actually the exports of Iran have been halved since these sanctions have taken place. We're talking about taking out another 1 million barrels per day. The good news is there appears to be a good amount of elasticity right now, and that it shouldn't send shockwaves through the market. But the impact that it could potentially have on Iran, with oil being its primary resource for bringing in cash into the regime, that's where members of Congress think that it actually might do some damage.
Mr. Schanzer, there was a 13-page restricted report obtained by the Associated Press. The International Atomic Energy Agency said today Iran lifted its output of uranium and that it continued to upgrade to the machines used to purify the material, which could be converted to reactor fuel. This is declared or known nuclear material. What about the undeclared material?
Well, that is obviously the major concern. I mean, there's concerns about whether there could be a secret facility, perhaps, that the West has not been aware of. But then there's also just the simple physics of the matter. And according to our estimates at Foundation for Defense of Democracies, we believe that if centrifuges continue to spin at the current rate, and they continue to enrich that uranium, we're going to see the potential for breakout by next year, by next summer. So we're looking at basically a year where sanctions need to bite, or we believe that the Iranians are going to be able to cross that nuclear threshold. That's what this legislation is intended to stop.
Mr. Schanzer, the report also revealed Iran's decision to keep its stockpile of uranium enriched to a level just a technical step away from weapons grade. Is the significance of that technical step an attempt to keep inspectors away?
Well, inspectors are going to keep coming every 2 weeks, and I think that, that's going to be a constant. But the Iranians have been toying with the West and saying that they're not interested in a weaponized nuclear program, and they keep insisting that all of this is for peaceful means. Meanwhile, being one step away from being able to weaponize, and that is what they've been dangling in front of us and basically taunting the West. And again, I think that this has been a message in response. It's obviously short of physical intervention, but it's intended to be a message to the Iranians at this point.
Sir, there have been recent reports that Iran's been giving the Syrian government military support in its bloody civil war. How does this complicate the international community's effort to deal with Iran's nuclear program?
Well, I think certainly it's made a number of countries more upset with the Iranians. They're looking to perhaps separate the Iranians from the Syrians. It's taunted the West to potentially come in and intervene in Syria. But I think what the Iranians have been able to demonstrate, whether through Hezbollah, whether through Hamas, whether through Syria, is that they have proxies throughout the Middle East, that they're not afraid to create messes and diversions all around the Middle East, all over the map, in fact, to make life more difficult for for the West to foment instability. That's what they've always had the ability to do, and that, of course, can send shockwaves through the oil markets as well.
Jonathan Schanzer, he's a former terrorism finance analyst at the Treasury Department, currently Vice President of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. He's joining us from Washington. Mr. Schanzer, thank you so much for your perspective tonight. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.